are you gaining a lot of flexibility on shot angle? Like, what kind of arrow setup, if you do have like a quartering 2 shot, are you like, dude, no, I'm gonna get through that shoulder bone and I'm gonna drive it and I'm gonna still double lung this thing and it's just gonna quarter through the other way? What is up, everybody? Mark on the mic here, joined by Mr. Troy Fowler, a.k.a. the Ranch Fairy, and we've got a hot topic today. We're going to try and make sense of broadheads, Troy.
Good luck.
I mean,
we're going to jump into the abyss.
Yes, the sea of broadheads. I mean, we've got 2-blade, 3-blade, 4-blade, bleeder blades, serrated blades, chisel tip, tonto tip. I call it tonto, tanto. Who gives a tip, and cut on contact. I mean, the philosophies, the different styles, they're endless, right? Expandables.
Pretty endless, yeah.
Expandables, very popular. I've shot a fair amount of expandables in my bow hunting career. I've shot a little bit of everything, right?
Yeah, sure. Me too. Yep.
And I have my every time I pick this one over that one, I guess I have my personal why, but it's generally based on, a hypothesis or, will this make sense or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's kind of a guess.
Let me ask you the question then. What are you shooting now and why?
So right now I'm shooting an expandable. I have been.
You just came off shooting bears, right? You shot it for bears? Or were you gun hunting?
That was a rifle hunt. Hunt.
Okay, that's fine.
So, and I've gone back and forth. And for me, it just came down to predominantly arrow flight, and I don't know. Yep. And that's me hitting the easy button probably on, setup or even just, maybe the way I'm torquing a bow or, somewhere in there, something's going on that I wasn't able to ferret out, and shooting an expandable kind of solved that for me. Now, what it didn't solve, though, is I do think by and large, with a fixed blade or like a single bevel 2-blade, I think I'm going to get better penetration, and I think I'm going to be able to, get through a shoulder blade, better or something like that. So
you're just going to have to be
disciplined.
At
a cost. It comes at a cost.
Well, it comes at the cost of a couple of things. You have to be disciplined. So there's a lot of disciplined shooters out there, a lot of people who shoot mechanical broadheads, and they are well-known bow hunting people, and they get to hunt a lot. And if you're disciplined and take broadside shots, shots that are good for mechanical broadheads, you're going to probably be okay. I err on the side of humans, and I used to watch a lot of stuff. I'm done watching it because I see it a lot, but I've seen it a lot, but 90% of my crew, but the people who follow me, are deer hunters. Mm-hmm. I think 90% of bow hunting is deer hunters, and there's a small Western group and some people who get to go out west, but there's a very small contingency of Western bow hunting dudes and dudettes compared to the deer world. And then with the advent and the popularity of the hunting public and some of those guys getting people out, the shot angles you get when you're public is wide and varied, and if you're a disciplined shooter, you're probably going to be okay. But it's just when you get that little quarter and 2, and you've been hunting 4 days, you got a soccer game at 2, it's 8 a.m, you hope this deer's going to die. I mean, I'm just being realistic. I was that guy, right? My kids are out of the house now. I can do whatever I want, but life gets in the way. So as long as you're disciplined with a pretty decent, mechanical broadhead, you're probably going to be okay on deer. Elk, I think, is a completely different subject because of the amount of animals that come quartering in.
Yeah.
A lot of calling, a lot of stalking. We've all experienced chasing an animal around on the ground, and they're curious, so they look at you. Like they're coming over there to find out what the hell you are if they ain't busted you yet. And it's rare that they walk broadside or back to you because they're coming towards whatever they're curious about. And we get a lot of shots because they're curious. So that's when it gets to be a little bit sketcho on mechanicals. And then I did a video on this, and I don't know if the data is accurate from the companies. But my latest concern with mechanical broadheads is if the companies are right, they're publishing kinetic energy values in the 50s. And you can just go to their websites and look at it. And I don't know where they got those numbers. And I'm not knocking them. I just don't know where. So I don't know. Okay. But if your bow's only generating 80 foot-pounds of kinetic energy, then that's a pretty standard number. 50 of it's lost when you bought the broadheads because they require 50. And you've only got 30 to go to do extra work. And I think that's what it means. Once again, I'm not knocking them 100%, and I'm not slamming because of that, because I can't prove it. All we know is if you shoot like a Magnus Stinger cut-on contact right next to a mechanical, 9 times out of 10, the Stinger's just going to in the same spot, right? Just like they're not there. So I'm going to, mechanical folks will probably won't talk to me, but I'd like to know where they get those numbers, because it's kind of terrifying to give up half your kinetic energy or more when you pay for them.
Oh, sure. And right now, I guess I'll name names. The mechanical that I'm using, and I killed a nice buck with it. Oh, I guess that'd have been 2 falls ago. Hard quartering away shot. Hit him, I think, probably about his last rib. Probably about a 25-yard shot. Arrow ran through him and actually punched through not his shoulder bone, but like I don't know, just
kind of the scapula.
The back of the scapula, kind of like that. You know, it was. I was like, holy mackerel! Did that get through the bone? It didn't get through the bone. It's kind of like the meat part there. It did stop though on the inside of the hide. I mean, granted, it ran through a lot of that animal, but it did stop underneath the hide on the other side. He kept the arrow with him for a while, broke it at some point in the tracking process, ran 100 yards, tipped over. But I do prefer a fixed blade. I've killed deer with fixed blades as well, and it's for those reasons that you're talking about. Just the sheer, I think they penetrate better. I think they're a little bit more durable. Like I said, I was trying to sort out an arrow flight issue. I think I've actually sorted it out. So I'm probably going to go back to a fixed blade. And I guess, currently in process of, which one that will be, which, season starts Saturday. So I better figure that out.
Yeah, here we go. Right.
But,
I get a lot of those emails this time of year. Hey man, could you fix my stuff real fast?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, you and I were talking about this earlier. For the listeners, I want y'all to ponder this, why you got what you got on the front. So we just discussed the fact that we're having a little arrow flight issue, and mechanicals tend to be a little more user-friendly because they are more like a field point. And so they give you a chance to, as you said, cheat the system and still shoot straight. Fine. Beyond that, what kind of analysis are you doing in your head from a durability standpoint, sharpness standpoint? What do they look like when you're done? I've said this on about 5 podcasts, and I said on a couple of videos. If your broadhead is really, really chewed up, I don't care what kind it is. The muzzies, I shot muzzies for years, and the blades always seemed to be ragged out. They worked. Some of them skipped off stuff, right? But I had a couple that were in the animal or, holding on by the fletchings where the animal destroyed the broadhead or ruined it pretty good. And that's when you got to start wondering, when you get a clean hit on a deer or an elk, and let's say it passes through and sticks like in a field in dirt. You didn't hit rocks. Like Central Texas, this all rock. There ain't no, if you pass through it, you can't look at the broadhead because you don't know who did what to it. But a lot of the farm country folks can do this out of a tree and just bury it in good dirt, and it wasn't the ground that chewed them up. And if you look at the blades, if the tips are bent, if the blades are real dinged up and bent and chewed up, you need to wonder when that's going to cost you down the road. And then start to think about why you're doing what you're doing, I think, from a lethality standpoint. Because it may cost you one for no reason other than that impact, the blades get shredded up. And a lot of people think that like this by chance serration that happens by tearing the blades up on impact is a good thing. And it depends. Most of that stuff's dull and it's not very long. So I'll give you an example. This is the Ed Ashby style 3-to-1 tough head. It's got a real low angle of attack, and the blade is absolutely super long. And I think these things are 0.065 or 0.70 thick, right? So this cutting edge stays on the meat a very long time to allow cutting. And then should you damage that much of it, you still got this to go.
Gotcha.
Okay. If you shoot like a real short, inch-long blade, 3-blade, they made a lot of broadheads smaller that are fixed so they can get aeroflight under control. Totally logical, static margin and lift working against the fletchings. You get bigger fletchings, and the smaller broadhead doesn't push on the atmosphere as much. It's a logical way to make a fixed blade fly to make it smaller. But you get these little short blades. And if 50% of that hits, generally when you have shorter blades, they blunt up. The angles get more like this. The blade may only be an inch tall, and maybe a real small broadhead, 1.1 inch, but the blades get real vertical. They're not laying down, more like this. They start because they had to pull the broadhead in to make it small. There's no way to do it, right? So you start hitting stuff. You start approaching. The blade starts approaching like this more, as opposed to this, the cutting angle. So it has more of a tendency, say this is a rib, it has more of a tendency to hit like that and blunt. It's not cutting and sliding. Generally speaking, we don't take our knives and slam them down on a steak. But we're flying a broadhead.
It's a good analogy.
At a target like that. Right. And it's just going to create blade damage. It's going to blunt it. It may not shred. It may not come apart. So we're not talking about an epic failure. We're just talking about two of the blades hit the same rib, which is totally practical with a 3-blade. Okay, got one sticking out here. Rib here, wham. Okay, hits that. Point goes in the middle, which is ideal. Wham, and you get half of a 1-inch long blade blunted. I'm talking dull. And so maybe you got a half an inch left and a quarter that's sharp. And that's where you start to struggle with longer blood trails and a direct lethality problem. And then the next two will go fine. Right? So that's the X factor.
Right.
Is the next two, you'll pot them, they go 60. And then you hit one kind of the same spot and they go 200 and you can't explain why. And I think, but I can't prove it, that it's edge integrity. Its capability to withstand impact and stay sharp. And I only know this when I learned to sharpen better steel broadheads, machine stuff, strop till you can shave your face. And I'm telling you, dude, I started killing. It's to the point now where this is going to sound arrogant, but it just happens. I got every shot on video. I back the video up. If it's on the crease or forward and low, I just pack up my stuff and go get them. I don't wait at all. They're dead. They can't survive it.
Right.
Because I've hit them low forward. If it's in the middle or back or high or something, I'll go to camp. Give them an hour. They may be 60 yards away, but something that only went 60 yards is dead an hour later too. Right? It doesn't matter. But it's one of the things I've seen that's totally anecdotal. But once I learned to strop really good steel and really get them really, really sharp and hit them when I hit them right. You hit them in the middle, sharp helps, but it's still the same liver kind of back of the lung thing. That's just physiology.
It's going to take some time, yeah.
It's going to take some time. And you just got to be smart on that situation.
Well, a question I have is, and I'm going to bring this back to me for a minute because that's what I like to do, Troy. So I'm in this. So I shot the broadhead that like my mechanicals, they fly great. I have that as a fallback, right? And then I also have some Helix single bevel two blades, and they're flying really good as well.
It's a really good flying broadhead
too. So I think I'm likely going to, head that direction. Like I was shooting a lot this past weekend. I was getting essentially exactly the same arrow flight. I'm like, cool, I figured some stuff out. We ought to be good to go here. But
what can I ask you what you're messing with? Because this will be good for people shooting broadheads. I mean, what are you fiddling with? Are you making changes to the bow? Are you torque, or what are you doing? What do you think you're doing to make the arrows fly better?
A little bit of everything. So I went to I mean you'll like this. A little bit heavier arrow, a little bit more FOC. Looking at what else did I change? I changed kind of my arrow. I just changed my arrow setup, and that was
did you stiffen up, or did you
and I think I stiffened
change the arrow, or
I stiffened up. So I stiffened up the spine a little bit. I think my form got better. Worked on my form in a few different ways. So like a lot of little things that I think probably were playing a part into that, and I think like I said, I think it was just like a lot of little things. But now I'm like, okay, cool. Like I said, I prefer shooting a fixed blade. I haven't shot that particular one during a hunting season yet. I've shot, golly, I've had good luck with Exodus broadheads, slick tricks, a few other fixed blades. But that single bevel two blade train seems to make a fair amount of sense. It seems like you're a proponent of that, but I do have some questions about like a single bevel. Well, I want to talk about all the different types of broadheads, but I guess because I'm talking about this right now, like a single bevel two blade versus a double bevel two blade.
Okay.
And the way I understand, a single bevel two blade, tracking through the animal, it maintains kind of like that rotational force, and then I guess a double bevel two blade wouldn't necessarily. So what would be the advantage or perceived disadvantage to either of the? Because to me, I'm like, well, again, I'm going back into hypothesis here, but I'm like, okay, cool. Yep. So the single bevel, it's going to maintain that rotational force. If I hit a shoulder bone or something like that, might break it and get through. But then I think like, oh well, like a double bevel though, like that might penetrate more because. Okay, let me rephrase that. Are you getting less penetration with a single bevel two blade because you've got that rotational force happening versus just tracking straight through? There, that's my question.
Okay, so there are two separate things going on there. A lot of people think a single bevel broadhead is imparting the rotation of the shaft on the meat.
Okay.
It is not a hole saw. So it's not a drill. It's not like you got a drill and the drill bit's spinning. It's not because of the fletch.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you an example. The Helix is a 40-degree bevel. I know that. I've talked to those guys a bunch. Your vanes, please tell me you got some offset.
Yeah.
Okay, you're not shooting straight vanes. Good. No reason to shoot a knuckleball, everybody out there. Make the arrow do something. So, yeah, make the arrow do something. Seriously, make it rotate. You don't want a ton of it. Once we got over 6 degrees of helical, things got a little weird. I shot 15-degree helical, and that was absolutely wild. But back to the topic at hand. So you got a 40-degree bevel on the front, and let's say you're 2 degrees offset in the back. That shaft's going to rotate once every 16 to 20 inches flying. They look like they're spinning fast, they're not. It's just because your eye can't pick it up. You just want that nice ball look, no wiggle and all that. Once it hits the meat, the bevels take over. And the bevels are actually offset. One's on one side, one's on the other. And they are a tool. They are a mechanical leverage tool rotated by forward motion. They don't rotate independent of forward motion.
Okay.
They will not. So once it hits the meat, all of a sudden the 40-degree bevel takes over. And those, when it bites, because it's like this, whatever's pushing on here rotates the bevel. Okay. And whatever you hit, it rotates harder. So if you hit a rib shot right between the ribs twice, you probably won't get much rotation. It will rotate some, maybe a quarter turn. You hit dead center on the shoulder blade, and that son of a gun is going to push, and the tissue is going to push against it harder, and it's really going to torque. The advantage of that is when the bones break, it's not a bullet, so they don't make a hole. Bones tend to break in the direction that they are laid out. So scapulas tend to break, well, they're at an angle, but they tend to break up and down, and often 4 to 5 inches. They'll snap. It's the force of the broadhead, and the bone pops. It can't take the weight. It's like sticking a screwdriver on a piece of board on a pine plank and torquing it, and it pops. Okay. It's just like that. If you hit the humerus, they tend to explode. This really impressive. There'll be fragments like a bullet. And what that does is it opens it up. So when the shoulder blade cracks, it loosens it up and allows the shaft to keep rolling. There's space in there.
Okay.
And when it hits the humerus, like I said, they tend to explode. It's wild what happens to them. The end of the humerus will just be all jagged, and there's fragments all in the meat, and that's all out of the way. And it keeps going. And then as it's rotating through the tissues the killing stuff, heart, lungs, all that stuff, it actually cuts on a bias, and all the cuts are at an angle, and it rotates, so it's a little bit of a longer wound channel through the killing good part, right? On top of that, I've actually seen this, and Ed talked about it in the Ashby studies. The really mobile stuff like lungs can grab onto the head and try to ride it a little bit and then end up popping off, and the wounds can actually get bigger than the broadhead because the rotation grabs it like spinning spaghetti on a fork.
Eesh, okay.
It'll ride up on the head a little bit and torque it and just make it a little bit bigger. Every other broadhead platform on the planet stops rotation at impact. There isn't any other device out there that will do it. So there is a potential for a 3-blade or a 4-blade or a 2-blade to break bone, break a scapula, and crack it. There is potential, but when they're flying, you got the fletchings rotating it for accuracy. Okay, When it hits, it stops and starts driving. Well, the shaft's going like that. The shaft's still in motion. With the minute it touches, the shaft doesn't know that it's hit something. So it's torqued a little bit and has to settle, and then it starts driving. So that's where the double bevel head has less potential for penetration through bone. It tends to make a double bevel shaped cut through bones and scapulas. Doesn't mean it stops. It just tends not to crack them. 3 blades will make a 3-blade hole if you hit the plate of the shoulder blade, which is really not that thick. A decent arrow, 550 grains, 500 grains flying good, will go through that. But you'll see a 3-blade cut, but you won't see any extra fragmentation. And we did this with pig scapulas. I got a butcher that got me a bunch of just the scapula bones. And I kept trying to hit the ridge. So the scapula's like this, and then there's a ridge that actually faces you on a broadside shot. It's horrible to hit. Super heavy bone. It sits up. It's about this tall on a deer. And and I kept trying to hit it, and I couldn't. And I'd hit the flat part, and it would just crack it. Well, I ended up hitting one, and I got a 6-inch crack, and the whole scapula plate, the piece was off. Because when it torqued in that heavy bone, the bone popped. It just can't take the pressure. So bones are actually relatively elastic. This is where some of the tests where you see people shooting dry bones that aren't green.
Right.
You're going to see weird results because the bone's not flexible anymore.
Right.
And so it won't give you the same results. And unfortunately, if there weren't wanton waste laws on game animals, we could do a lot more testing, but you can't shoot a deer on video when you can't do it. You shouldn't do it. If the game warden shows up and you got 9 arrows in a deer and you're testing and they've got their head right and they're a little warmed up, it's illegal. That's why the pigs are good. That's why the buffaloes and Cape buffalo and the Argentinian buffaloes and all that stuff are so good, because you can do it. It's not illegal to shoot them 100 times.
Right.
So
right.
it's really, really, but that's the difference. Every broadhead platform on Earth stops rotating at impact and starts driving on a straight line. And a single bevel broadhead, the broadhead itself is a tool. And when it hits, it starts doing its own thing. It cannot do it independent of forward motion, though. It doesn't just spin. It doesn't just rotate. It's got to go forward, and then the bevels, which are offset, like they're sitting like that. They're not on a straight line. Okay, my hands are all crazy, but they're more offset like that, and they can't not rotate because they're not on the same plane.
Gotcha.
And you want them fighting in the same direction too. And one more thing about single bevels, you need to match helical.
Right. Like right helical, so
right
bevel.
Or left and left. Right. Because if you shot a right helical and left bevel, the bevels would want to go left when it hit at impact. Yeah. It'd be rotating to the right, and then it would hit, and then the bevels would take over, and it's going the wrong direction. So that's a terrible idea. There's worse ideas, but that's a bad one.
Yeah. Yeah. What about have you experimented with, across the spectrum of broadheads, but like tip style, as far as like cut on contact versus like a chisel tip like you might find on, say, like a classic Muzzy or something like that, and then that Tonto tip? Like, have you been able to?
Yeah, we played with that a lot. The Tonto tip comes down to steel quality. You really got to have pretty good steel to cut a Tonto tip on it and have it hold up, because it's beveled, right? And if you have really bad, cheap or thin steel, you won't see the performance on the Tonto tip as well as you would on something that's a little heavier. I've had, solid luck with kind of I prefer cut on contact like a Stinger. If you're going to make the jump, just go to a Magnus Stinger style broadhead, start there, get it to fly and shoot those guys. But the chisel tips, like the old school Muzzies, really do pretty well. They're not a plan B arrow, but they're a plan A- arrow, and flying okay. They do all right. And I'm saying that because they don't bend, they don't break, they don't fracture. The head doesn't snap. Well, I've never had one of those points fold over on me. Gotcha. I've never broken a Muzzy. And I shot a lot of crap with them. Back before I could tune arrows, I just zeroed my sights to broadheads and hunted that way, and my field points shot about 3 inches left, and I was like, yeah, whatever. Not that anyone else has ever done that. But I've not had one come apart. So back to the idea around philosophically why you're picking what you're picking, durability really needs to be your first question. Tip durability, penetration durability, and blade durability. It's a complete misunderstanding of how broadheads work when you just randomly pick it because it seems to be popular or whatever, and you don't understand that you're slamming it into things. An uncontrollable medium of variable density, and you have you have 100% chance you will never know what you're going to hit, and no two hits are the same. So you have this massive variability at impact, right? They may fly straight, they look good, freaking fantastic looking, and everybody thinks you're great. Got it. But the target's so variable. I mean, the animal's variability is wide and varied. And like I said, you shoot 10 animals, it'll never be the same.
Yep. I mean, yeah,
it'll never be the same.
You've got, I mean, who knows? I mean, and
even just rib cage hits. Let's say you make 10 perfect shots. It's never really the same. One moves, one spins, one rolls, one stands there, takes like champ. right? You got a rutted up buck that's chasing a doe. He doesn't care. And you just plunk him and he stands there and it's going to smoke him. That's the one that you'll pass through 90% of the time because they don't move. So that's where I want people from this podcast to kind of consider, are you shooting what you think is the highest penetration potential intact sharp broadhead you can buy, or you within your price range, or are you just making some decisions off some idiots like me, influencers and stuff, who decided to convince you of one thing? And like I said, I think it's just a complete misunderstanding of that you're slamming stuff into stuff. Mm-hmm. At the most basic level, your stick is flying in the air and then it abruptly runs into something.
Right.
It's a car crash. Right? It's a car crash you didn't plan.
Yep.
So that's where I think people need to start thinking.
Well, one thing you made me think about, for me with broadheads, I'm like, hey, I need it to work once. You know what I mean? Like I do think of, like I have thought of them as like, hey,
that's disposable.
Do I need it to work really well? Yes, but it is disposable. I'm okay with that. That's a cost of doing business. I need it to work well once, right? But, watching some of your videos and just some of the things that you've said today, I'm like, oh, like it didn't really, I mean, yes, I want it to be durable and I want it to stay intact. I don't want it, I don't want a catastrophic failure, right? But, you're talking about even just the sharpness degrading before it gets into the good stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
yeah, right.
Well, I didn't think it would happen that fast.
No, it happens immediately. So we saw this. So you don't start to see this till you start hunting. Pigs are real bad because they're always muddy and dirty, and they just naturally have dirt in their hair and they roll around in the mud. That's just what they are. And buffaloes and then elk do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Elk wallow, all of them. So, and they lay on the ground all the time, so their hair is bound to be full of sand and stuff. They don't go to the car wash, get ready for deer season, right? They just be an elk. So you're shooting, hair already sucks. We already kind of know it eats up stuff. And cutting it, you see that when you're butchering them.
Well, it's funny, like, I don't know why I haven't thought about that when I think about my broadheads. But yeah, like you said, when you're butchering or I'm trying to cut as less hair as possible because it dulls my knife blade.
Yeah, right. So then make your knife go 270 feet per second and slam it into that.
Right.
So you just exponentially increase resistance because Newton's third law says for every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. So here comes your broadhead flying pretty fast compared to a knife, and it runs into this massive dulling surface. And on top of that, there's dirt. And none of us run the blade flat on a piece of sandpaper before we butcher something.
Nope.
But that's what broadheads are doing. Back to my discussion of the angles, right? So you shoot a mechanical, it's coming in like this, and then it opens like that. It is going straight. That's a little bit extreme, but it's camera. So some of you are back here. Got it. But I'm just saying, you're attacking at this angle into the hair and a relatively flat surface covered with dirt and sand in it. And the blade edges are hitting it this direction and just taking a beating as they approach. And you haven't hit rib cage yet, brother. You just hit hair. And if you hit an elk near the shoulder meat, it's probably 6 inches to the lungs.
Mm-hmm.
Out of the hair, through a piece of the shoulder meat. Rib cage is still back here. We have not hit the rib cage yet. Hair, dirt, piece of meat, hits the rib cage, breaks through that. So you took on some damage at the hair, meat's, whatever, not a big deal. And then all of a sudden there's rib cage and extra damage, and it still hasn't gotten to the kill zone. It's not there yet.
Yeah.
And the potential to damage the broadhead is tremendous before touching the rib cage. And then the rib cage says, hey. And ribs are kind of flexible, so they move around a little bit. They ride in a little bit, and they actually can pop across more of the edge. And like I said, until I really, really started stropping, even when I shoot Mike at Magnus is one of my sponsors, I will take his heads are really sharp, and I'll take them. I strop every one of them, and I just take them to the next level to where the hairs jump. Like I don't want to cut and have it fall on the blade. I don't want hair to be there, like on the blade or nothing. A few, but not. It shouldn't all lay down like cutting hay.
Gotcha.
And just that change, and then shooting muddy pigs, I saw shorter blood trails. And I need to start calling them tracks because you can't control blood trail, but the tracks are shorter, 60, 70, 80 yards when I hit them right. Repeatable, right? And before I started the channel, I was losing a bunch of them, shooting mechanicals and some of the other stuff. I didn't have good arrow flight. I was just like everybody else, trying to figure it out, right? I didn't have a clue, and I just decided to dive deep into it. But that sharp, durable thing and low angle of attack kind of, like an approach angle like that has really, really helped put the animals down faster.
Yeah, that blade angle,
really the goal.
That blade angle thing is something that, again, it's like as we talk through it, it does make sense, right? It's like if I was going to try and, I'll use the pen that I have in my hand as an example, but if I was going to try and poke it through a piece of paper, I'd do it like this. I wouldn't do it like this. I wouldn't hold it vertically and try to push it through the paper sideways.
Yeah, nature's a pretty interesting thing. So fangs on a snake are pretty pointy and long. This is a stingray sticker. It used to be 7.5 inches long off a 200-pound southern stingray I caught. Notice the shape.
Yeah.
Right? Long and narrow. Everything in nature is like that. We don't have anything when you start to think about bee stingers and that kind of stuff. You don't see stuff like that that's just abrupt angle devices. Probably the most abrupt angled thing out there is shark teeth. Tiger sharks have really interesting teeth, but God, the pressure they can exert is, kind of overwhelming. It's 300 Weatherby level, pressure. So we'll just let that slide.
Yeah. They've got some things to overcome the shape there.
Yeah, that's another thing I just popped into my head. Amongst all the kinetic energy and momentum discussions that go around the internet every year, and your arrow's not speeding up, it doesn't go faster.
No.
So the further out you get, back to my analogy of let's say the mechanical guys know it's 55 foot-pounds to do whatever. And I'm gonna say that means that the broadhead will hit the other thorax. Let's just say that they're saying for maximum lethality, you need 55 foot-pounds of kinetic energy. Okay? I don't think that's what they mean, but I'm gonna allow for that in this scenario. So we got a broadside bull elk at 60 yards. Perfect situation. He's looking away. He's got some cows. He's not real jumpy. And you're in a good spot. Here we go. I've done the kinetic energy test on this. So at launch, my bow would be running with a 400 grain arrow, would be running about 79 foot-pounds of kinetic energy. Okay? At 60 yards, it's 55. If the 55 is right, I have a problem. And here's where that fails. And I can't let this slide as the guy who says mechanicals kind of suck. They still penetrate, so I don't know why. We still get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I don't think that 55 number is right. I don't know what it is, right? Because people still get penetration when the math says they shouldn't. So, like I said, I'm not gonna be that philosophically inconsistent to say, oh, they suck and just suck. No. The math says that you should have 0 kinetic energy at impact. But they still penetrate.
Yeah.
And hundreds and thousands of them die every year. So I don't know what's going on there, right? I don't know what's going on there. The only thing I know is they're super inconsistent.
Yeah.
And I'll be fair with that. I mean, there's no reason not to.
For sure. What about, you have a broadhead like the Magnus with serrations. What are those? why are those there, and what are they doing? Because you don't see that on a fair amount of broadheads.
Right. So I talked to Mike about this, and I'm a huge fan of their interruptions on the Magnus stuff specifically. They are interruptions, and I've spoken to Mike at length about this, and I really like them. So here's the blade right there. Well, I think that might be in focus. If not, I'm going to wobble it around.
Sure.
But anyway,
y'all
can go on the internet and look at the Magnus Black Hornet, Sarah Razor, or the Stinger Buzzcut. So what I asked Mike this. I said, what the hell are you trying to do with the, magic? People call them serrations, but they're not. And he said, I was trying to make the blade longer. So each of the dips that's in those heads is actually sharpened. And we were trying to create interruptions for soft tissue to get in the holes and get cut more.
Okay.
So those on Mike's broadhead, it's more like a chainsaw blade. There's a tooth, there's a dip, there's a tooth. The top of the teeth, the chainsaw thing's it's not hooked. Okay. Don't go totally with me. Look at it sideways and in your mind on a chainsaw blade, and imagine that the teeth are flat and sharp on top. And then the dip is sharp, and then it's flat, and the dip is sharp, and it's sharpened across the top, and it's sharpened in the dips. So it's his particular head is not a serration with the points like we see on serrated knives.
Okay.
It's actually flat, and the flat is maintained and sharpens. So there's little chainsaw teeth kind of things that are flat and sharp. And then each dip is also sharp in there when you sharpen them.
Gotcha.
And I think it's a phenomenal killer. And he kind of said, well, God, I didn't think about that, but I'm glad we, accidentally bumbled into that deal. I've seen great results with those, and can't prove this, but it would make sense that since those little dips are hidden, they wouldn't take on damage.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting thought.
I don't know that the tissues get in there, and they do not rotate. So hang on there. I did copy his design, and I made the Fowler tough head shredder. So I took a chainsaw file, see that, and I put them on a single bevel. So I know it's going to rotate, right? It's going to rotate into the flesh, and then those little guys there, it's the same design. I took a chainsaw file, cut them in there. So it's got a flat right here, and then it dips down, a flat, it dips down, a flat, just like that. And they shot this particular head. This is a 300 grain tough head with a 125 grain insert.
Jeez.
And it blew right through Cape Buffalo, like went in the woods. So theoretically, with rotation, those little interruptions should grab more soft tissue that's real stretchy and stuff. Like lungs are, like when you have them in your hands, they're kind of wiggly, right?
Yeah.
Like the heart's real firm, and the lungs are kind of, and they are wiggly.
Jello-y, elastic.
You want that wiggly stuff. You want more cuts in the wiggly stuff. And I just played around with that. I don't know that there's any anecdotal evidence or real evidence. I think it's anecdotal. I don't think I'm making a broadhead that's 20% more lethal. Mm-hmm. I just like to play around with stuff. Yeah, that's my real hunting arrows. My hunting arrows are 715 grains of that broadhead on the front. And they're a lot of fun. Nothing stops that thing. I can shoot this stuff anywhere. It's awesome.
I believe it. We're talking about, and I like, and I've used, and I've had success with, some of those more compact fixed blade broadheads. And what you say about that, I guess, shallower, longer cutting angle does make a lot of sense. Are there things that you have to overcome with a longer broadhead like that? Are they trickier to tune because of their shape? Even though, like, obviously the work that they do once they impact,
yeah, right.
That makes sense.
But you don't want to miss by 6 inches either, because then you're pissing up the rope. Right.
Yeah.
You do not. You want the animals to move, and it is what it is. But you don't want to be inaccurate.
Right.
Right. You want the arrow to be accurate to your intended point of aim, and if they move, it is what it is. especially deer hunting. It's rare that they stand still. But God dang it, you don't want to be 6 inches off, then they move.
Right.
Right. Unless that always goes to the front. I said this on the Hunting Public podcast. I was like, if we could make an arrow that always knew to go towards the front of the animal, we could really get them.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist. So that would at best be a 50% deal. So broadheads are interesting. I have an example here. This makes people freak out, but they get it. All right, I got a little short arrow here. I do this when I do talks. It's fletched. I shoot feathers. It's just 4 fletched, nothing crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my broadhead's on the front.
Okay.
Should that fly?
I don't know. It looks a little bit different.
It's a broadhead. It's a fixed blade broadhead. The only reason you're wondering is you see a fletching.
Mm-hmm.
And your understanding of what a fletching does just got spun out because you've not ever thought about a fixed blade broadhead having some air resistance like a fletching.
Right.
Everyone kind of half knows what a fletching does. They're wrong, but they get the idea that it provides some stability at the back. And what they're wrong about is the aerodynamic piece. But they understand that the fletching creates, they think, drag and stabilizes the arrow from the back to keep the front from taking off, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a war. And what's happening is you have a lifting device on the front, and it wants to do its thing.
Mm-hmm.
Here's your balance point, let's say. And you have a lifting device on the back, and it wants to do its thing. So when the arrow's flying down range, remember, this just spun your head out of control. Now you understand why they want to do that, because you see a fletching.
Right.
But it's got a point.
Right.
It's got a point, and it's got blades. Crazy, huh?
Yes.
In this example, this is a giant broadhead. And this is little fletchings.
Right.
Guess who's going to win that one?
I think I would say the broadhead.
The broadhead, because it's got more surface area.
Bigger wins.
Right. Ironically, this is the best shooting broadhead I've probably ever shot in my life.
And what is that one?
They shoot. That's the tough head. That long,
okay,
skinny guy. And we think it's because it's so aerodynamic. I mean, it's real long, right? Jets are long, rockets are long.
I was going to say,
planes are long.
It looks like a fighter jet, you know?
Right. So this is your problem with the fixed blade. And one way you can compensate for that is making sure that your arrows fly bare shaft with at least start in a good launch position with field points. And then Dr. Ed actually talks about this. If you really want to get in the minutia and you fletch your own arrows, buy 2 inch, 2.5, 3, and 3.5 inch fletchings. And if the 2 inches, if the broadheads wiggle a little bit, put a 2.5 on there. Taller's better. So he said what you should do is bare shaft, fletch, shoot your broadheads. And if they're a little weird, increase the fletching size. In other words, try to overwhelm that at the simplest strategy with this.
Okay.
So that this guy's not doing that and this guy's can barely pull.
Okay.
Like that right there, that look on your face, when I do talks, the whole damn crowd goes, holy crap. Like it really makes sense. That's a fixed blade broadhead right there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a fletching. So it spins your head out of control and you get it, right? You get it. So this is where the forward to center thing happens. Listen, if you're shooting a 70-pound bow with a 400 spine arrow, you're already bending so bad, you could put 700 grains up front. It's not going to work because the arrow shaft is just literally turning into a banana because it's a lot of mass. It just pushes back, right? The first thing that happens when you release is the knock moves and then the point takes off. The shaft has to get going in motion. The first thing that feels pressure is the knock, right? So if you got a ton of forward to center, said, hey, this Fowler guy's pretty smart. He's going to put the forward to center on the 400 spine. That arrow's going to just turn into it's going to bend like that and go like this and take off going down range. It can't launch real clean. So a little bit more forward to center. Aerodynamically for the stick helps the whole thing fly a little better.
Gotcha.
And that's just aerodynamics. The model rocket world knows this. The guys who shoot stuff in the air a long way, missiles, that kind of thing. The Ukrainian guys don't have any money. And we just read an article where they're putting giant bottles of water on their bombs that they drop so that they are more accurate. They're adding forward to center with water. So they don't swim through the air like this. They just go, woo, and they're putting it all on the front. Is that crazy or what?
That is crazy.
So, yeah. And then if you can get that thing to fly real straight, then when it hits, it's flying straight. It's not a little cattywampus.
Right.
The worst thing that could happen is that your arrow approaches and there's your point, and it's a little like that because the back of when it touches, like when it hits the animal, if it's this way, it's going to want to go that way.
Right.
Because it's so long.
Yeah, I think if you've shot, I think a lot of us have seen that. When you're fiddling with different setups, you're like, there'll be times where I'm like, well, it's in the bullseye, but it ain't in the bullseye straight like my field points, so that's a case of you're like, well, like you said, it's going to likely want to continue on that vector where it impacted. I would say going off of what you say, particularly, well, I guess, with any style of broadhead, but it's just going to want to continue on that path.
Well, the knock's so far back, if it's on a different part of the shot line, so perfectly they'd go like this.
Yeah.
If it's just a little off, when the broadhead hits, it's still over here. It's not going to correct. The broadhead's going to drive at an angle, and the knock's going to want to travel out. Yeah. It's like hitting a nail not square. Right. It's exactly the same thing. When you don't hit the nail square, it cattywampses. It's exactly the same. That's the closest analogy I can come up with. That when you hit the nails touching already in the wood, and you don't hit a plumb, the nail head goes sideways. Yeah. That's the closest analogy I can come up with. I'm trying to think of another one, but for this discussion, there we go.
No, it makes sense. What we talked about, so durability, sharpness, and maintaining that sharpness being critically important. What kind of materials are you looking for in a broadhead that you're like, yeah, that should be a pretty durable head? Regardless of, maybe the style or whatever, but like what kind of steels are you looking for? Like what could a person maybe be like want to make note of?
I think Magnus makes their stuff out of 1095 stainless. I haven't gotten into metallurgy. The machine steel stuff, all of the machine steel stuff I've messed with has generally been really, really good. Okay. One of the weaknesses of the whole discussion is, generally speaking, if you reduce the mass of the broadhead, you've reduced everything in the broadhead. So you start to get real thin. They have to do it to get to 100 grains. There's no other way to get there. It is what it is, just manufacturing. So you thin out the blades, you start getting the .033 kind of thicknesses that are getting on the edge of tinfoil because they're hauling. And I only say tinfoil because they're fast. They're not sitting still, right? You can't bend them with your hands and stuff, but they're going 280. And then they hit something a little bit at an angle, and there's all kind of stuff going on there when they slow down. A lot of pressure on the head per Newton's third law, right? Whatever energy is delivered to the target, the energy delivers back, or the target delivers back. So this isn't a fair question for me because I don't have the answer. All I know is the machine stuff that I shoot has just been nails. The tips don't bend, they don't come apart. And then the helix is pretty thick, the one you're shooting. Mm-hmm. And the blades themselves are pretty thick, so you start to see some durability go up just by sheer mass. Gotcha. In the blade thickness, right? But it's when you start to get real thin is when you start seeing the blade shreds and the dings and the wrinkles. It looks like tinfoil. and put your finger on it, and it's real dull, but it was pretty sharp when it was in the quiver. And so that's the only, it's not I can't answer the question and help people other than just to say thicker is thicker. I mean, it just is. And I'm not seeing as many tip bends and failures and that kind of stuff with thicker stuff.
Gotcha.
You know, once you get to 0.04, 0.045, you start to get durable. And most of the companies are running pretty good steel. Some of the mechanical companies are literally running plate steel cut out with a laser that is really not very high quality. And it just is what it is. They sell a million of them and they've got big businesses. So that's that.
Gotcha. When we're talking about, you know, the medium of, you know, a critter when you shoot through it, you've got, you know, and we touched on it before, but multiple. I mean, you've got the hide, you've got muscle, you've got bones, you've got, you know, like, hopefully, you know, man, you know, punch it right into the lungs, which that's like, you know, an interesting medium of itself. Like, how's that affecting, you know, like, or I'd say compare that to which, like gel is great. Like, it's cool. You watch an arrow or go into gel. It's consistent, right? So you have, it's easy, or it's nice to be able to, I guess, you know, concretely have that variable, I guess, accounted for with a level of consistency. And you can kind of measure what happened, compare, you know, A against B.
Sure.
Critters are not consistent at all. You're shooting like, you know, you got a hard quartering shot, you're shooting through like 10 different things.
That's right.
So what are you seeing as far as from, like, you know, anecdotal shooting critter type results that a broadhead needs to do? And maybe it's nothing outside of what we've already talked about.
Well, I'm going to touch on the testing, and then I'll back into the second question in the physiology. So the trouble with foam and gel and all that stuff is that you see the same results across every video or test you ever see on any platform. It's about half an arrow. You don't see a pass through on a gel block or a foam target, or one that buries 7 inches deeper. And then there's 3 that all shoot halfway in. They're all real consistent results. And to your point, we don't see that when we're hunting. We see inconsistency,
right,
on hunting. So they're not correlated. A gel test is a gel test. It's good. It's cool to look at. They all penetrate about the same. Somebody will say, wow, that one penetrated an inch further. That's probably the right one. Yeah, I don't know. And foam and wall targets at an archery shop are super consistent. You see half an arrow, maybe. And if that data was correct, we'd never see an arrow penetrate further than that on any animal on the planet. It's a big hole in that argument, because we do see less penetration, more penetration, and in between for various reasons. So you can just say that's a foam test. But you can't say, and then if some of the testers, it's gotten to be real popular in the last 2 years or so to test a 600 grain arrow and a 500 grain arrow and a 400 grain arrow, shoot them into foam, and they all penetrate about the same. Well, that's just a velocity issue. So the targets are mixed up and made. You wouldn't buy targets if your arrow flew through them.
Right.
Like, you wanted to stop. So they'd make sure that they're going to stop a heavy, slower projectile or a fast one. Right? So the way that the target works is when a really fast projectile hits it, it pushes back per Newton's third law and slows that son of a gun down. And a heavier arrow's got a little more inertia, and it starts pushing, and it just has a longer time of pushing, and they get there about the same. If the testers that were doing this would then go hunting, like say in Africa, or somewhere where you could shoot a bunch of stuff, and shoot a 650 grain arrow, shoot 4 animals, shoot a 500, shoot a 400, and just see if there's any variability, right? That would shake that loose, right? Because there is going to be some variability with all the platforms, and the heavy arrow may not overperform. We don't know. Per Ed Ashby's study, Ed's sole goal in the Ashby Foundation was, or the original 30-year study was to reduce the variables. He said, the target is inconsistent. This we know. What arrow platform will give us the highest level of success no matter what?
Right.
Knowing that the target is inconsistent. So backing into the physiology piece, a lot of people, this is just people in general, their skill sets all over the place. I'm a sales guy who happened to go to respiratory therapy school, and I'm a dork and I like science. There's accountants and plumbers and linemen, and there's people with varied skill sets, psychologists and scientists, and they don't dive into this stuff as deep. They just need to understand the basic stuff. Well, the basic thought process is just hit them in the lungs and they'll die. It's a little more complex than that on what you need to be thinking about when what you're hitting. Obviously, a heart hit, aortic hit, cut that apart. Pretty much people understand you've severed a hose on your house, but it's not infinite flow.
Right.
And it just sprays out. They only have so much blood, it comes out really fast. But the lungs have airways, arteries, and veins. And you want to cut all of them.
Right.
So let's just say you take a deer out of a tree stand, you hit him 6 inches in the, right at mid-body high, because you're shooting downhill, right? And the exit's in the armpit, and you shoot over across the top of the heart. You want to cut every vein, every artery, and every airway that broadhead can touch, not have it dull and just cut a hole in the lungs. That is lethal. I understand that. It's just not as lethal, and you just don't want to chase them around. First of all, it sucks. Tracking sucks, and it's not good for the meat. If they're alive for hours, it's really bad for them. All the adrenaline, all the crap the animal goes through, chase them, kick them up a few times. It's terrible for your table fare, and it's just not good for the sport.
Right.
Like you just want to plunk them. At the end of the day, you hunted 6 days, and here you go, and wham, 60 yards, it's over. So that's when you're thinking about your broadhead. You want to think about, how do I make sure that I give my chance in a varied target the smallest percentage chance for failure, not the widest chance for lethality. You want the smallest amount of failure points. And that starts with the broadhead bending, dulling, coming apart. Those 3 things right there are huge I was on a podcast with one of the pros the other day, and he gets to hunt like months at a time, 4 bull elk a year, deer, scatter a couple of mule deer in there for fun, go all that hunting. Listen, the average person I'm helping hunts 10 times a year.
Yeah.
Hunts. 10 hunts. Not 10 weeks, not 10 days. Saturday. They get Saturday morning, baseball at 2. Sunday morning, the kids lose, so they get to hunt the Sunday night. Right. The kids win, they're in the tournament, and they're playing till dark.
Yep.
And then they go to work. And they're coming back. They got 3 baseball practices that week, so that can't hunt in the afternoons. Here comes Saturday again. I did this for 10 years. I've coached my kid and a bunch of kids. And you're not really hoping they'll lose, but come on, man, I want to go deer hunting.
There's a silver lining.
Yeah, there's a silver lining. So you really need to be thinking about how do you reduce the variables in your penetration and your lethality and your cutting capability to just a small few things. You hit the ridge of the scapula with an arrow under 550 grains and a decent broadhead, it's going to be a bonk. It's just going to stop. And you hit them most places, even in the edge of the scapula and stuff, you're going to get them, right? But when you start shooting the really heavy duty stuff, when you make a mistake, you can get away with it. You can shatter shoulder blades and stuff when we make a mistake. And it's just, the more I do this, the more you want to reduce the fails. Mm-hmm. Not expand your killing. It expands your killing capability, but we're often thinking about the most amount of way to kill them when you want to say, Okay, there's 3 shots I can't take, or 2. Like a dead hard quartering in on the point of the shoulder, I can't take, but everything else I can take. You're in a good spot, right? But if you could take that shot with a broadhead that will do it and an arrow mass that will do it, then you've just increased your success rate.
Well, so that's what I wanted to ask. I mean, at what point in your arrow setup, like you might be sacrificing some long range performance, perhaps.
Yep.
But at what point, we'll say shots, I don't know, I'm going to throw a yardage out there. Shots 30 yards and in, are you gaining a lot of flexibility on shot angle? Like what kind of arrow setup, if you do have like a quartering 2 shot, are you like, dude, no, I'm gonna get through that shoulder bone and I'm gonna drive it and I'm gonna still double long this thing and it's just gonna quarter through the other way?
Yeah. So tell me tell me your bow specs and I'll tell you what arrow you should be shooting for what you just asked me.
Golly. You know what? I should have.
Your draw length.
Okay.
You look normal size, so your draw length's probably 28 inches.
28. Pulling 65.
Okay, you're shooting my bow. That's fine.
And
that's fine. That's all I need to know.
Yeah.
So, which helix are you shooting? How heavy?
Right now, I've got hundreds, but I think I'm going to switch to some 125s, or at least I'm considering it.
Okay. All right. So, I would have you in a 250 spine arrow.
Okay.
I'd have 150, at least 50 grains or 100 up front.
Okay.
And I'd have you in the 150 helix. And I'd have you right around 525 grains right there.
Okay.
It's 550 for that distance, and you are good to go. Wouldn't be a problem at all. Over 550 preferable, and if you got to 600 and it was flying great, holy moly, howitzer, right? One of the things on the distance deal, this came up, I was on a podcast with a guy who owns an archery shop the other day, and he shoots 465 grains. He's killed all kinds of stuff. His goddamn wall behind him was impressive, elk and everything. And he said, hey, one of the things, he said, I don't disagree with the downrange, on target inertia. It's heavy. You're talking about broadheads and ain't going to bend. Got it. Right? He shot like a slick trick and pretty standard deal. And he was a big bow tuning guy, knew all that stuff. And whatever, look on the wall, right? I'm not going to tell him not to do what he's doing. He said, but man, I've killed a couple of things out at 60, 65 yards, and them heavy arrows really drop good. And I started thinking, this is the first time this popped in my head on a podcast. Of all the animals I get probably 500 pictures a year that I post on my Instagram of people who've shot stuff. I think that's fun. I fish most of the fall. The fishing's about to start. The saltwater fishing gets real good this time of year. But I'm going to deer hunt that 1 week, but I'm going to fish like crazy. Anyway, I rarely see low hits. I tend to see more high hits because the animals are jumping the string.
Okay, sure.
So that introduces, if you aim, say, right on the crease, and an animal jumps the string, drops. They're not jumping, they're dropping. You're introducing the shoulder blade into the kill zone, even if the arrow's on perfect aim. And generally, you're going to hit higher than you're going to hit lower.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of screws with the idea that you're always going to hit low. Heavy arrows tend to drop more. You can move your pins. But I don't see a lot of low hits. Mm-hmm. I tend to see mid-body and up. So a lot of it's tree stand stuff. You got to take that into account, right? So that allows you to really drive through and really shoot through them. And there's another effect there that is phenomenal. And that is when you have a razor-sharp honed broadhead and you hit them right. Let's say you don't break a shoulder blade or anything. You just hit them. Vital V, rib cage hit, perfect, exits in the armpit, that kind of above mid-body drive in out of a 20-yard shot out of a 15-foot tree. Classic deer hunting. They tend not to run. But when they got an arrow in them, they tend to haul.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't get It's the biggest mechanical on earth. If you don't get a pass through, if you don't get the broadhead out the other side, you're still got a high hole with a whole arrow in it.
Yeah. Yep.
The deer's probably dead, but there's no blood trail possibility. But what I've seen is the animals not reacting. They tend to not run as hard, and then they tend to just run in the woods and kind of slow down.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know what happened. They get to the brush, unless you're hunting in the thick stuff. But at our place, generally you have some open area between, the feeders or wherever you're hunting, and then they run in the brush. And then you tend to find them 20 yards in the brush. And I think they get to cover and stop because they don't know what happened.
Right.
And they're not running the whole time. I don't have a lot of pigs that I've shot for the channel that are balled up in some brush pile where they died running full speed and just, get the old flopper. They just ran out of gas. I generally just find them laying there. And generally there's blood. Like the blood trail will be okay. And then where you kill them, there's blood like everywhere where they stood there and,
right.
They were disoriented and it's just blowing out. And then, damn, they're dead right there.
Yeah.
So that's another advantage to really blowing through them.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. That's a really, really good point. That buck that I was telling you about earlier that I shot with an expandable, hit him, like I said, it was hard quartering shot. Knew I ran the arrow up through him pretty good. I could just see the, fletch sticking out.
Sure.
And I think I waited an hour. I felt, I was like, I think I heard him tip over. But, they're in the trees. Like, did he tip over?
Yeah, right.
Did he run into a tree on his way out? I don't know.
Yeah, right.
And when I went to start tracking him, I mean, it was thin. Like, I was like, I was starting to get worried. I'm like, man, it looked good. It sounded good. I thought I heard him tip over. But, like, as far as I shot him the evening, so we're tracking him with flashlights, but it was thin, super light. Just pinpricks,
sure.
Really. Only when we got probably about maybe 5-10 yards from the deer, I found where he coughed up some lung blood, and I'm like,
sure,
okay, that's good.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But and then the deer was dead there,
right there, sure, yeah, right.
But up until that point, and I do think had I had an exit, it would have been a completely different story.
It would have been ugly. It would have been ugly if you'd had an exit. Or it would have been better.
It would have been, right? I think it would have been a lot better.
If you're shooting a mechanical and you get an exit, god dang, man, the holes, they're phenomenal when they work.
But also,
I mean, they are.
I don't like having to say that either. And I'm.
It's a fact.
I don't like that.
When they work, there's nothing like them. They are phenomenal.
Exactly.
I have absolutely had some blood trails that I should have videoed and sold to the mechanical companies.
Right.
On pigs with them. I mean, god awful, knee high,
just like
spray in a circle, just awesome.
When as a hunter,
I've also had awesome, didn't find them.
Yeah. Yeah. When as a hunter, the one thing you really want to find is a good blood trail, and even so, you're kind of like, ugh, that's gross.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. We've had some where it looked like a paint can was just poured down the trail. It was phenomenal. I've had it happen with fixed blades too, though.
Yeah.
And my son just shot 2 pigs with the ranch head we just came out with, and both of them were from the get go. I mean, he shot it, and there was blood on the ground right where you could see the digs where the pig took off, and it was just, it was stuff like that.
Yeah.
Bop, 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 bop. But it wasn't. We didn't have to go looking. You just walk. Yeah. Got it. But they were complete pass-throughs, forward and low exits.
What about getting back to different broadhead designs? You see, well, I mean, that Magnus head, is essentially like a 2-blade. I think it's a 2-blade double bevel, but then it's got those bleeder blades on there.
Yeah. Right.
What's going on there? Why not just the 2 blades? More blades better?
Well, so there's some people making some pretty good broadheads with single bevels too, with little bitty bleeders on them.
Yeah.
I think I've got one here. Yeah. So one thing I prefer if you're going to shoot a bleeder blade, if you're going to shoot the magnet stuff, I prefer you shoot the bleeder blades. So you can see that they're way back.
Okay.
Like the blade's up here, and they're small. They're just meant to open the tissues up and maybe create a little bit more damage internally. But you just want the hole to open up a little bit more. It doesn't seem to hurt. And then here's our head from the blood ring from Tough Head that I got on the Ranch Freight head, and this is an Evolution. They're also back set, way back, right?
Yeah.
So the broadhead gets to work before the bleeder blade, get anchored in there good before the bleeder blade get in there. We actually designed this bleeder blade to break. Fred Bear did this. The steel on the Bear razor head was super, super brittle. He wanted it to shatter.
Why?
If it hit something hard, the original Bear razor head.
Yeah.
He wanted the bleeder blades to break. The main blade was like 0.05 thick. It was heavy duty. But he wanted if the bleeder blades hit something hard, he wanted them to shatter so the broadhead kept going.
Just shear off, and then the main head just continues to do the
keep
work.
Going. If it doesn't hit something hard, it's there and doing what it does. Extra blades.
Oh, man.
If it's not, it breaks off and then lets the broadhead keep going instead of stopping it.
Troy, you're twisting my head up. We've been talking about durability, structural integrity, tough as nails, broadheads. You don't want this thing to bend like, oh, no, that was designed to break.
Right. Now it's a bleeder blade, though, and it was back set, right? He didn't want the main blade to break. He had a nice square tip on the thing, and it was a pretty thick piece of steel. It was good steel. But he designed the bleeder blades to either hit the right stuff and keep going, but if it hit the wrong stuff, it would snap off and let the broadhead go. Yep, just let it keep going. Don't let it be the limiting force to keeping the broadhead from penetrating. I thought that was pretty practical. If you're gonna straddle the fence,
yeah,
the main blade doesn't break, the main blade doesn't dull. The main blade does his deal. And then if that hits something hard, and like I said, those things are tiny. Like they're hardly his bleeder blades on the original Bear Razorhead, they were big. I mean, they weren't, they didn't make it like a 4-blade, but they were pretty good sized. Mm-hmm. But they were super high tensile. I think that's the phrase for it. Anyway, they were brittle.
Yeah.
And they were designed to snap off. And I think the way they were designed, they were if it broke, it would loosen the other side. Like it wasn't two separate pieces. It was one piece, so it would break off and the other side could get loose and keep going. We've never broken a bleeder blade on our heads yet. The guys have shot a bunch of stuff in Africa, but nothing big and nasty. When they go big nasty hunting, they're shooting that guy, or they're shooting the 2-blade, machine head. You ain't messing around. You don't want to have to use the 500 nitro.
Right.
It's only there for show. You want it there for show, but you don't want to have to use it.
500 nitro is a hell of a broadhead, though. I mean, it really is.
Yeah, exactly. Got some pop, 600 grains of hoo-ha, hello. As long as you hit them. If you don't hit them, they keep coming. And then they turn you into the stuff under a buffalo's toes.
Yes, yes. Human goo.
Yep.
Interesting stuff. I'm trying to think. I've got I've got a ton of questions, still have questions. What did we miss anything talking about broadheads? Is there anything that you wanted to get to that you're like, I wasn't smart enough to ask?
The Aeroflight thing, getting to use my fancy double-fletched arrow is I think a lot of people listening to this podcast are spinning out right now. Not bad.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're lost. I'm just saying the first time I did that, I looked at the crowd and you could have flown bees into everybody's mouth. And I went, holy crap, they get it. You can talk about it spatially, but until I showed that thing and put the fletchings on the front, they all went, holy crap, now my basic understanding of fletchings on the front really makes me understand why a fixed blade broadhead might not fly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what I might have to do for it. It's bear shaft tuning is the way I do it, and every single arrow too. So I hate getting a dozen arrows in. That's why I just stick with my 700 grainers. I went hunting with the meat eater guys for nail guy, and they're great big things like elk size, 3/4 of an elk. And I built those 700 grain arrows, and I got 8 of them, and I knocked, tuned, bare shafted every one of them, fletched them, shot them with broadheads. They shot like darts. And that's what I hunt with now. I didn't get a nail guy. So, but when I get a dozen arrows in, now that I've done it, I can't go back. I can't just shoot a fletched arrow and say that's pretty close. It just doesn't. Once you've seen what can happen when you bare shaft every single arrow, and if you can, let me clarify that, you're still holding on to the bow. And let me tell you something, you're not that good. Everybody listening. And what I mean by that is, if you can get the tear from 2 inches down to half an inch or inside of that, you've just dramatically increased your barrel flight. Bullet holes are perfect. I got it. But it's still us. And when we get on these projects, the way I do it is I get 2 arrows and I get them to the best bare shaft I can get them. And I go inside. Or I go vacuum the truck. Or I do something else. Or I go to the god-awful spreadsheet I got to go work on for work. And I sit it for 30 minutes. And then I put 2 more. And I shoot those. And if they go well, I'll shoot a third. But I don't try to do a dozen at a time. You'll go crazy and you'll out-rep yourself. It's like leaving my golf coach. I was a pretty decent golfer with a single-digit handicap one time. And my golf coach said, never leave hitting balls bad. He said, if you're working on, like, say you're hitting a cut 7-iron and you're taking 9 yards off of it and you've hit 6 in a row, put it up.
Yep.
Don't hit it until you hit a bad shot, because your head leaves bad.
Yep.
It doesn't leave with a good feel. And I think that's what happens with a lot of people bare shafting and stuff and trying to tune arrows. Is you shoot 50 shots and you're just not, the first 10 were your best form probably, or probably the middle 12 or 20. And then the backside starts to get a little sloppy. It takes forever. But God dang, man, once you've done it and then you fletch them and then you shoot broadheads and they just go, you're like, oh, it's worth every rep. And those are good reps.
Right.
You can't outshoot a bad arrow.
Yep. Yep.
You can't. I've tried. And like I said, the spec I told you I would put you in is exactly what I'd put you in. And even 125 grain hit links would be fine. But I'd put a little more forward to center out in the front of it. I'd stiffen up to 250 unless you're already there. I would assume you're shooting a 300. And I would see how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
There's an advantage also to a stiff arrow on impact. They're stiff.
Right. They
don't tend to flex as much. I wish I could show you the video of us shooting the pig scapulas. We had a high-speed camera on it. I was shooting 250 spawn. I was shooting the arrow we talked about. So it's about 620 grains or something.
Okay.
With a Apollo. And the arrow comes in like this, and the pig scapula's here, and the arrow hits, and it literally went. It bit like that, and then all of a sudden went poof, and straightened out and punched through. But it was a 250.
Wow.
If it was a 400, I bet it would have tried to turn it inside out. I don't know that.
Right.
Every time you do one of them stupid tests, you go, I should have bought some 400s. Like, you don't know that. You can't predict it.
Right.
But it literally hit the bone and bent about like that and then popped through and then straightened up and kept going. I was like, oh my Lord, that's a lot of deceleration. It looked like it was sitting still at one time.
Wild.
It wasn't, because the shaft is still pushing. It's coming.
Right.
But it just, and then, and went through, and it was a 4-inch crack right on the ridge of the scapula, and the scapula was sheared off. So it cracked horizontally and vertically because the broadhead rotated right in this corner. It was a perfect hit to break a bone. It was one of those spots, right, where just everything came apart. It was impressive. But seeing that shaft bend that much on impact was terrifying, because you start to think about mechanical, okay? You take your deer, give yourself a little bit of angle, say it's quartering away, it starts approaching, hits and starts flexing, and then the blades open up, but they're not opening up equally.
Mm-hmm.
One blade's on the meat side, one blade hadn't opened yet. it hits, then finally that second blade hits and it opens up, and the other blade's trying to open up. You're talking about swimming all over the place. And it's just, that's an energy suck, right? That's the target increasing the variability. The target's doing it. If it was completely broadside and you were completely on the ground and shooting completely flat at it, it's a completely different scenario.
Yep.
Because the blades open evenly and they can continue to go on their flight path. So it's a dumb sport. Just get some guns. Lead fixes everything.
Oh, I tell you what, man. I tell you what. I don't entirely disagree with that, but man,
I've said this a lot. I could have y'all send me a scope. I could get a Remy 700 off the shelf, a decent rifle with a 4-pound trigger, kind of crappy, right? I could shoot it at the ranch. I could zip it in at 100, an inch high at 100, and I could mail it to you, and you could never shoot it.
Right.
And you could go blast a deer at 300 yards with it.
Right.
You could. And you could mail it back to me, and I shoot 2 deer, and I can mail it back to you, and you can shoot 2 deer. I guarantee you. But I can't send you my bow.
Nope.
It won't work. Bows suck.
As much as bows torment me, and I fiddle with them, and I spin in circles, and ask myself, try and ferret out the details. Is it the arrow? Is it the bow? Is it the this? Do I have too light of this? Too much of this? How much of it is me? It's probably me. It's definitely me. Is it not me?
It could be you, but I'll tell you one thing about bows. In tune or out of tune, they don't do different stuff. Bows only, the wheels roll over, it goes to an active state, and when you turn it loose, it goes to a static state. That's all they know to do. They don't do a lot.
Right.
They don't change. It's not like shooting a muzzle loader in the old days where you had to pour it down the barrel and one shot hits, 4 inches off because you didn't have powder charge right.
Sure.
So I have, as much as I've explored this, great form is great, but I think that's the hardest thing because 99% of people can't find a great coach to teach them how to shoot a bow. So 99% of us are in the backyard trying to figure it out.
I'm in that camp.
But you can change the arrows and a lot and fiddle with that easier than you can change the bow.
Yep.
And like I said, the bows don't change. And I know you can tune them and yoke tune them and lean them and all that stuff. But I'm on the side of the 95% that, but just like me, I went to the shop. I got what they told me. I tried to learn to shoot a bow, got some half-ass instruction. Certainly not world-class instruction, right? And that might help. But if the arrow isn't, I want to do this with somebody who's a great shooter, okay? And I want to hand them 4 different arrows and see if they hit the same spot.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah. You got to have good ammo.
I think the arrow's going to change the whole thing with a hooter shooter.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start to really want to spin out on this. Is your whole arrow set consistent?
Right.
Or did you tune with one arrow? And then you said, okay, 300 spine, 50 grains in the front, 125 grain point. That shaft shot good. Certainly the rest of them will. I have found that not to be the case.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I have found that the less expensive carbon arrows are real finicky. They can be tuned
right
to match. They tend to not be as consistent across the set. And that's why in the old days we had numbers on our arrows, 1, 2, 3, 4. Those were your hunters because those things shot for some reason. The broadheads went right.
Yep.
And the other ones shot kind of half, but they shot okay with field points.
Yeah, so, I mean it's true though. You get a dozen arrows and you get that one, and you're just like, dude, this thing is consistently an outlier. And like you said, you can fix it, but sometimes it takes a while to even ferret out that. Wait a minute, yeah, we got a little bit of a problem child here. We got to.
Yeah, you got to number them. You got to
number
your shafts. If you haven't done any tuning, you've got to number your shafts and shoot broadheads. It's another advantage of shooting a one-piece head or a replaceable head or a head you can sharpen or replace the blades.
Yeah.
You can shoot broadheads a lot. You don't need to shoot multiple broadheads. I get people all the time, they order 6 of my ranch fairy heads. I say, do I need to shoot all of them? No. You can just take one. What usually happens to me is I'll be practicing and you'll hit the pipe in a deer target, in the leg or whatever, and you'll ding one real bad. It can be sharpened, but I'll just say, okay, fine. It's still straight. It's just the blade got dinged up real flat. So now I just mark it with a Sharpie, and I know that's my test broadhead. And I can shoot it at anything. If I hit a rock or a tree or whatever, I'll just take it out and keep shooting as long as it's straight. But you can shoot all your broadheads and resharpen them, and there is some cost savings there if you get them back. You just resharpen them, keep shooting them, because my son shot the same broadhead on 2 different pigs and just sharpen them up. But trying to figure out, that's why I have the test kits and I have the bear shaft process in one of my playlists, that you got to shoot every single arrow bear shaft and then fletch them. And that's where you start turning the knocks.
Yep.
So most shafts have a stiff side. So somewhere in here, I've built custom fishing rods, and you can take a fishing rod blank, you bend it on the ground and you roll it, and it'll hit a spot and it'll go whoop. It'll just roll over, like it'll go, and then it's roll. That's the seam.
Gotcha.
Some people put the seam down. Some people put the eyes right on the seam to make it stiff. It's a whole nother archery. God, don't get me started thing. But arrow shafts have that same seam. And when you shoot the arrow, let's just say this is stiff. Your first arrow's stiff up. You don't know this because you can't see it. And it shoots great. Next one's like that. And it shoots a little weird. So what you do is turn the knock, and all of a sudden it goes up.
Mm-hmm.
And you only find that out by just shooting.
Right.
You can do a fletch with broadheads too. You can take a broadhead, find one that's just a little, like, you don't have me convinced that all your broadheads, your helixes are flying perfect yet. But the ones that make you wonder, turn the knock to the next position.
Okay.
To see if it comes in. Just try that.
Yeah.
But having this set of arrows consistent across the whole group allows you to have arrows that are launching the same. And then you can actually zero, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then one thing for all the listeners out there, when I go through all this crap and I've bear shaft, knock tuned, and then I put broadheads on, in my box over there, I have 5 arrows that I don't shoot anymore. The broadheads have been stropped. They've been shot. I know they're accurate. I don't keep shooting them. You have the potential to hit one on pipe, bounce, hit one next to it, chip it off, bend it. The repeated banging into the targets doesn't really help them.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I set 4 or 5 aside and they only hunt. Now I may kill a pig with them or something, clean them off, refletch them or whatever if they get shredded off, and shoot them again. But I don't shoot the everyday drivers. They're not daily drivers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They are hunting arrows. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't shoot them. So if you get a dozen, you get 5 that are nails, fletch them up, shoot your broadheads, double check them, make sure they're flying good, and you're done. That's all the shooting you do with them. And you only hunt with them because they're the best ammo you've built, and you don't want them to be more abused. I guess that's the way to put it.
Yeah.
You don't want them to have any potential for having a little crack in the back. If they hit something hard, the knocks tend to fly out.
Right.
If you look in the back, often we think it's the air in the shaft slowing down, and they're cracking. And they'll crack the back. Mm-hmm. If your knocks ever fly out when you hit something hard, make sure that there isn't a crack inside there, because it'll blow up on you. Yeah. When you're shooting it. But that's going to make them inaccurate as well. That knock's not going to be as stiff in there as it was before. I mean, that's why archery sucks. Can you send me a scope? I'll send you a gun and we'll just kill some stuff and laugh. I mean, they'll be a lot cooler.
I think.
Mail me one of your guns. I'll mail it back. I mean, whatever you want to do, it's fine.
I mean, I think we just solved all our bow tuning problems.
Yeah, right. Just boom. They don't jump the string. They do not jump the bullet.
No.
They do not jump the bullet.
Here, jump this. Bang. No, I love it. I mean, and where I was going, what I was getting to before, Troy, was all these variables that we, try to account for in the process and working through the somehow the pain is part of the process and it's part of the fun and the figuring it out. And, when you do get it figured out, man, it is rewarding and there's just so much to it. And I appreciate, all the info and work that you've done on your end to sort out
thank you very much. It's
the mystery behind what we're trying to figure out.
The arrow flight reps and the bear shafting is all worth it. It's better to shoot a set of arrows that's matched and then do your reps than it is to try to out-rep arrows that aren't consistent. It really is. It's more rewarding too. So you can always go to the old Ranchberry channel and look for my arrow tuning playlist, and I've got all kind of great ideas on there. But it's going to cost you some time. You're going to be frustrated a little bit. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to learn a lot about you. You're going to learn about your setup. Unfortunately, you're probably going to have to spend a little bit of money somewhere. It's very likely you might have the wrong shafts, the wrong stuff. And that's why it's just not accurate with broadheads. Field points are liars. So a smart person in the background, and I'll shut up after this, would say, hey, Fowler, you just told us to bear shaft with field points and they're liars. Didn't you just, aren't you sitting on the branch and sawing the wrong side? That's Samuel Clemens, by the way. Also known as Mark Twain. So yes and no. The goal of the field points is they are the most aerodynamic projectile out there. And the goal of the bear shaft with field points is to get the set to match before you fly broadheads. Don't try to shoot a broadhead with no fletchings. It's crazy. Because of that. And it doesn't have any opposing force up there.
You really would just have your fletching up front then.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So the field points allow you the most aerodynamic stability, allow you to get a set of arrows that are consistent. They're launching the same, and then they will launch a broadhead the same. And hopefully it all comes in. That's the only way I've been able to really do it really consistent. And especially if you're going to shoot 50 or 70. Yeah. They got to be right. They got to be right.
Yep.
So,
and like you said,
man, thank you very much for your time. This has been great. This has been unusual. I've not had this discussion with anybody. Been a lot of podcasts.
Well, I mean, like I said, tons of good information from your end. Appreciate all the hard work and the time, right? When you're even talking about getting your setup set up, it's like, whew.
Oh,
I mean, that is a lot.
It takes a lot of time.
That's a lot of time. That's a lot of time.
It's worth it though. When you drive one right through one and they run 50 yards and they're down, it all makes sense after that. It all makes sense, and that's the goal. Well, I don't want anybody to chase them around. Yeah, it's boring to chase them around.
Yeah,
no fun.
No fun at all. And getting to a spot like where you're at, it's not like the result that you're getting is not a surprise, or it's not a question mark. You're like, no, I know what's going to happen now if you do your part. If
I do my part, I've shot enough stuff now. I've shot enough stuff on video. I've shot enough stuff and changed things enough. Like I said, when I back up the video and I look and I say, okay, that was dead. Go. There's no reason to maybe wait 10 minutes, but people might think that's irresponsible. When you hit them in the heart and lungs with a sharp broadhead, you know it's not going to fail, and it passes through. They can't survive it.
Right.
There's no the ones that get up and you go 100 yards 30 minutes later and they get up, your shot placement isn't where you thought it was, or your broadhead failed and didn't do enough damage, and they're still going. There's no other explanation for it physiologically. Yeah. So that's my parting shot for today.
I appreciate it, Troy. Always fun. Good luck with the rest of your fall. Sounds like it's going to be a lot of fishing, which there ain't nothing wrong with.
A lot of trout, redfish. I'm after a tarpon. Going snook fishing in late September. We're going on a dove hunt and snook fishing trip. That's not going to suck.
No.
Next 60 days, I'll be fishing probably 4 weeks, 4 different. Every cold front, I'll be chasing down to the coast. It gets wild down there, and the weather's nice. And then the first week of November. So I think I'm third season rifle mule deer. That'll be fun. My wife got sick and tired of this bow hunting shit out west. She's like, "You got a whole safe full of guns. Stop coming back with nothing. Just go shoot a deer." She's very practical, though.
It does not make sense. Well, hopefully, you've put all this time and work into your bow setup. You'll find a little bit of time to fit in a little bit of bow hunting here yet this year, though.
Oh yeah, well we have a 3.5 month season. It's not good till mid-November and into January. So, I'll go fishing.
I like it. That's a good plan. So,
all right, man. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Troy. Take care. Thanks everybody for listening. Hopefully you got a lot out of this. I know I did. It always twists my mind up, but there's lots of good information there. And good luck bow hunting. Good luck getting your bow set up. The season for many of us is here or just upon us. And shoot straight, get a deep penetrating arrow, recover them quick. There we go. That's the goal, right?
That's the goal.
So
yeah, it is.
Thanks, Troy. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Yep.
There you have it, folks. Thank you very much for listening. As usual, give this video a like if you liked it, comment something below, and give us a subscribe to the Vortex Nation podcast channel. It would mean a lot to us. Also, why don't you give us a follow over on Instagram while you're at it, at Vortex Nation Podcast. We'd love to hear from you over there, and we'll keep you updated with all kinds of cool photos and videos from our adventures that we do here. Otherwise, we will see you on the next one. Thank you again. Happy hunting and shooting, everybody. Have a good one.